President and Mrs. Obama left Washington a short time ago. They're heading to South Africa for Nelson Mandela's memorial service. On Face the Nation yesterday, Bob Schieffer focused on Mandela's life and times. Bob, good morning to you.
Hey, good morning.
I love the show yesterday, how you started with Maya Angelou and then ended with the poem that Maya Angelou had written for him, because I thought it so brilliantly captured his life and what he meant.
Well, she is an amazing person.
I think so too.
In her own right. And when I called her last week and asked her to be on, I thought, you know, she's not in the best of health. She can't travel very much. And she said, no, I'll do it because I want to. And then I found out she had written this poem.
Yes.
She didn't tell us, and she told us on the show yesterday she had promised, when the State Department asked her to do this, not to disclose it for 48 hours after he was
but
dead.
How did you get Gayle King to do it?
You know what that is? That was an email from Bob Schieffer to Gayle King. Yes. You know, what they're saying in South Africa, though, today about him is that, you know, while they're grieving, of course, they're also celebrating. I saw one woman who said, the old man did his part and he did it well, and now we must let him go. So what do you think that people should remember about why he was so powerful? Because he opened minds and hearts all over.
The thing about him, and I was thinking about this all week, you know, the definition of a hero, we always say heroism is doing in extraordinary circumstances what you would do in normal circumstances. And usually a hero does something, he jumps out in the line of fire and saves his comrades, he dives into the Potomac River and saves a drowning person. But Nelson Mandela was so different. His whole life was an example to us, not just one act. His whole life was an example to us, and it was an example of so many things: bravery, courage, perseverance in the beginning, and then in the end, forgiveness and reconciliation.
Hemingway described courage as grace under pressure.
Yeah.
You know, it was interesting to hear, of course, remembering that Congress, of course, put in part these sanctions on the South African apartheid government. Ronald Reagan vetoed those sanctions. And I know you spoke with Secretary James Baker. It was interesting to hear him say he knows that Reagan regretted that.
Yeah, and it's the only veto that Ronald Reagan ever had overridden by the Congress, and he wound up losing his own party. The Senate was controlled by Republicans in those days, and Lowell Weicker, the senator from Connecticut, led that amongst the Republicans, and they overrode that veto, and that had an enormous amount to do with, I think, with Nelson Mandela finally being released from prison. I mean, we came to have a different attitude about South Africa. Up until that point, the Reagan administration saw South Africa as our ally against communism. And people kept going out there to the South African embassy and getting arrested. Randall Robinson was the one who started all of that, and people came to have a different attitude about that.
Earlier we had Nancy Cordes on talking about the GOP is taking tutorials about how to improve their relationships with women, or courting women voters.
Sensitivity training.
Yeah, sensitivity training. What does that say, Bob?
I don't know.
What does that say?
You know, I'm going to leave that to them to work that out.
And could I ask you about your highlight from the Kennedy Center, other than Snoop Dogg telling at the Kennedy Center, which is something I never thought I would see, telling the party people to make some noise and people screaming. Were you as surprised as I was when Bill O'Reilly walked out to introduce Herbie Hancock?
Yeah.
I guess. I
was very
to
surprised.
me, you know, I love the Kennedy Center honors. I mean, it is, when it's, I've seen all but 2 of them. So I guess I've seen 38 of them.
Wow.
And what's interesting about that is, in the beginning, it wasn't such a hot ticket. I mean, they'd come around and say, how many tickets do you need? You know, my mother would come up from Texas. And what was funny, Walter Cronkite would invite his mom, who I would also add looked exactly like Walter Cronkite. She didn't have a mustache. But Walter's mother and my mother would get together and talk about their kids.
As a musician, you had to love last night.
Yes, I loved it from beginning to end.
Yeah, well, I mean, I like singing Garth Brooks. I gotta say, I like Garth Brooks singing his own songs more than singing Billy Joel's songs, but he is terrific. Don Henley from the Eagles, how are you going to beat that?
We could go on. It was fantastic.
Oh, it's always just a great evening.
Piano Man was there.
Everybody will get to watch it later this month on CBS. All right, thanks, Bob.
You bet.